Well, cheers. How are you? Good.
He's teaching.
And you? Got out. Have some fun with that.
working on.
Yeah, they're working. Yeah.
That's great, so I don't need this one.
Yeah.
Are we starting soon, or should I just take a seat?
1 minute.
Okay. Ready to start? Ay 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 Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid Ay 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 ay
We were just sitting together with the family in the library before we came in, and Michal related that when she was visiting her grandmother the other day in the hospital, as Alice often did, she apologized. She apologized for everything, though there was never anything to apologize. And here she apologized for not dying quicker. She didn't want to inconvenience people. She said with a smile. This was a remarkable woman. 89 years is a long time, but we would have liked just a few more hours, a few more days, and certainly months and weeks and years if we could have had them with her. We celebrate her life today. She has nothing to apologize for at all, of course. She was just pure sweetness and love. She cared so deeply for her family and for all who knew her. And so we are sad. Though again, we know that it was a long and full life, and you'll hear in the stories that the family shares of its richness and its depth, there was still so much more that we would have liked to have done with her and to, most importantly, shared with her in the simchas, the joys that are to come for this family. And so we remember her for blessing, and the best way that we can do that is to do as she did throughout her life, is to model her behavior and her character, to take from her life the lessons that she taught us through her good example and to do them in our own lives. That act of apology that she would often say was because she cared so much for all of us, because she was always trying to do not only her best, but even then some. And if we could honor her in just one particular way, it would be to try to strive to be as she was, so considerate, so thoughtful, so intentional in our actions towards each other, as she was towards us. The Psalms have within them a reading, or a writing, I should say, Psalm 15 from King David, that speaks about the quality or the character of an individual that makes them worthy of God's reward, makes them worthy of being remembered on in heaven. David writes, Adonai mi yagur bo chalecha mi yishkan b'char kodshecha. God, who may abide in your house, who may dwell in your holy mountain. And then David enumerates the qualities of such an individual. Those who are upright, who do justly, who speak the truth within their hearts, who do not slander others or wrong them or bring shame upon them, who scorn the lawless, but honor those who revere God, who give their word and come what may, do not retract it, who do not exploit others, who do not take bribes. Those who live in this way shall never be shaken and shall dwell on God's holy mountain. I think there are so many qualities of Alice in that list from King David. So many qualities of who she is and who she will always be in our memory. Another psalm, Psalm 23, its familiar words, Adonai Roi, the Lord is my shepherd. The cantor will chant, and then we'll read together in your handout.
Adonai Roi lo echsar, bino desheyor bitzeni, al mei menuchot yenaleni, nafshi eshovev, Yancheni b'magle tzedek leman shemo, gam ki elech b'geitz al mavet lo ira rak yata imadi. Shiftecha umishantecha heima yenachamuni, taroch lefanai shulchan neged sorerai, dishanter b'shemen roshi, Kosi revaya, achto b'chesed yirdefuni, kol yemei chayai, v'shavti beveit Adonai, le'orech yamim.
Let's read together. It's on the inside of your gray handout, Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. In Proverbs, there is a passage that in traditional Jewish homes a husband will read to his wife on Shabbat called Eshet Chayil. Now, Stanley grew up in a traditional Jewish home and left Orthodoxy before he found Alice, and then they embraced their Reformed Jewish community in Leeds. I'm not sure, Ann and Jeff, if your father ever said this to your mother. Did he on Shabbos? He did. And so it's appropriate and fitting then that we read these words again. Because if among many things Alice was, she was an Eshet Chayil. She was in a very true way a woman of valor, a woman more precious than fine pearls. Eshet Chayil mi yimsa, a woman of valor who can find. She is more precious than fine pearls. Her husband trusts in her, and so he lacks nothing. She does him good, never harm all the days of her life. She perceives her labor is rewarding. Her candle burns on into the night. She reaches out to those in need and extends her hands to the poor. She is clothed in strength and dignity, and she faces the future cheerfully. She speaks with wisdom. The law of kindness is on her lips. Her children rise up and bless her, and her husband sings her praises. Many daughters have done valiantly, but you Alice, you Eshet Chayil, you woman of valor, you excel them all. Amen. Alice loved nature. She loved to go on drives with Anne to see the leaves change and the blossoming trees, to appreciate the beauty of British Columbia and all that was around us. And so it's fitting when we think of nature and when we see the changing of the seasons that we also think of how she appreciated that level of detail, that beauty in God's world. In the rising of the sun and its going down, we'll remember her. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we will remember her. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we will remember her. In the rustling of leaves and the beauty of autumn, we will remember her. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we will remember her. When we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember her and her boundless energy. When we are lost and sick at heart, we will remember her. When we have joys we yearn to share, we will remember her and how she celebrated at your wedding. And so long as we live, she too will live, for she's now a part of us as we remember her. And so we want to invite Jeffrey to come up and to remember his mom.
Mum was born in Elland, a town in the West Riding of Yorkshire between Leeds and Manchester. Her father, David Garsford, was a solicitor in Elland. Her mother, Amy, was his housekeeper and nanny, looking after his 4 children. When his wife, Alice, died, Amy moved to Canada to join all her brothers and sisters. But after a few months, she was wooed back to England. Amy and David married, and they had 2 children, Kenneth and our mother, Alice. Mum's childhood can only be described as idyllic. She lived in Holywell House. This was a mansion in the rolling hills of West Yorkshire, in the same area as a British comedy, which you may have seen, called The Last of the Summer Wine. She and Ken amused themselves with tennis on the lawn. They had a proper lawn tennis court. And grape spitting competitions in the hothouse, where they had grapevines. Indoors, they made a slide from an ironing board, which they would ride at speed down the stairs, and predictably, things got out of control when Mum, Ken, and the ironing board careered onto the landing and collided with the grandfather clock that never worked again. Following boarding school in Southport on the Lancashire coast, Mum trained as a nurse. She was a sister on a paediatric ward at Leeds General Infirmary, and by all accounts, she was outstanding. In those days, visiting was once a month. It's difficult to believe today when we visited Mum at Vancouver General, we could stay there as long as we wanted, but in the old days, on the paediatric ward that she nursed on, parents were allowed to see their children as little as once a month. But Mum introduced evening visiting every day so the children could be settled for sleep by their parents. There must be many mums and dads and children who are very grateful to her for that to this day. She met our father, Stanley Hulman, an orthopaedic surgeon, while working in Halifax. They fell in love and married. 9 months after a holiday on the Isles of Scilly, I was born, and 17 months after that, Anne came along. When we were very small, Mum started to take a profound interest in Judaism, and she converted. Mum became an active member of Sinai Synagogue in Leeds. She sang in the choir, became the first captain of the newly formed Sinai Girls' Guide, and succeeded our father after many years as librarian. Mum loved reading, curling up with a good book, as she used to say. She enjoyed bird watching and the countryside, especially walking in the Yorkshire Dales. She also loved the Highlands and Islands of Scotland, and that's something that Anne and I are both passionate about. Mum was a devoted mother and wife. She was always there for us and only went back to work nursing part-time when Anne and I were independent enough. She was an excellent cook and a generous hostess to family, friends, and acquaintances alike. When I phoned my school friends on Sunday to tell them Mum had died, they all said she was lovely. But what summed her up best was the comment, she was everyone's favourite mum. Dad died almost 32 years ago. The one thing that kept Mum going was looking forward to the arrival of Anne and Eric's first baby. Tragically, Rachel was stillborn at 8 months. This deeply affected her. Mum was lucky seeing her 2 children happily married with a wonderful son-in-law, Eric, and a wonderful daughter-in-law, my wife, Lorraine, who both adored her. Happily, it was not long before Daniel and Michal came along for Anne and Eric, and a little while later, our 3, Joshua, Jennifer, and Nathan. 12 years ago, Mum announced she was moving to Vancouver. This came completely out of the blue for us. It was logical, as she used to go to Vancouver for extended visits. She knew the city well and had developed a small network of friends here. Approaching 80, moving to Vancouver was a new, exciting and life-affirming beginning, and not a sad decline into old age. Mum's life in Vancouver was one of supreme contentment, in a lovely apartment with a view of the mountains and park where she could watch the seasons change and indulge her passions of Scrabble, watching tennis and sipping whiskey, although I'm not quite sure if the order is correct. Mum's last big trip was in 2012 to Toronto, to Daniel and Tiffany's wedding. This summer, Michal and Greg got married, and for that, I and my family shall be eternally grateful, as Mum got to see and spend quality time with us, all her grandchildren, family and friends. Anne and I would like to say thank you to Olivia and Lizelle, who looked after Mum with such compassion and love, enabling her to stay in her beloved apartment up to the end. Anne couldn't have been a more devoted daughter, and Eric was always more like a son to her than a son-in-law. She adored him. Mum lived a long and full life well. She was respected and loved by all who knew her. I'm sure that Anne shares my sorrow that Mum never realised what an amazing person she was. She had been a nurse bravely and single-handedly, making changes for the benefit of the children and parents alike. She was a mother who provided Anne and me with a blueprint for a successful and happy life, a loving mother-in-law and proud and doting grandma. She was someone whose hospitality, humour and wisdom everyone who was fortunate enough to know her will miss. Mum was afraid of dying, but I think she took comfort knowing that her final resting place would be near the granddaughter she never knew. Mum died in Vancouver on Sunday the 29th of November as British tennis history was about to be made. It would have been around 4 p.m. in Belgium. I just wonder if she timed it to catch the end of the Davis Cup from above.
I'd like to add a few words specifically about my relationship with my mom. I remember being in the playground with my friends at elementary school and boasting that my mum was the best mum in the world. Of course, that met with the other children saying that theirs was the best mum, but I insisted that mine really was. And I had plenty of proof. My mum baked individual apple pies for our lunches. In fact, my lunch was always the envy of my friends. Mum found the time to play games with me, and we particularly loved Chinese checkers. She knew how to give me ideas for school essays when I was stuck. And if I was suffering from a severe bout of anxiety over something at school and couldn't sleep, she'd slip me a pill and say, "Shush, don't tell anyone." It might have been Valium, I'll never know. Best of all, she was the captain of my Girl Guide company at Sinai Synagogue. From her, I learned camping skills, including how to turn a cookie tin into an oven and how to boil a can of water using just an almond and a paper clip. So many of my friends and fellow guides adored her and looked up to her for her seemingly endless resourcefulness and sense of fun. Our years apart were tough, but Mum never complained and was ready to leap on a plane whenever I needed her. In Vancouver, our relationship flourished. We swapped books, and until recently, we had weekly trips to Granville Island, walks on the beach, car trips to scout out the best blossoms in spring and the best dressed tree in fall. When we spotted a likely tree on the horizon, we'd take the car and try to get close to it, if possible standing underneath it to admire its beauty. Our strolls in Van Dusen Gardens were always special, and the most recent one we timed right to admire the laburnum blossoms hanging down to meet the purple allium. I'll miss Mum terribly. She was very proud of me and Jeff and all her grandchildren. I'd like to close by reading a part of a letter that she wrote to me that Eric found in her apartment yesterday. "Don't grieve for me, Anne. I've had a long and happy life, safe in the knowledge that my children are helping to make the world a better place. And what could be more gratifying than that?"
When we recite the Yizkor prayer for our mothers, we refer to a mother who has passed away as an Imi Morati, my mother, my teacher. In this simple phrase, we have a recognition of the significant role entrusted to the mother, her role as teacher to her children and all who know her. Because the most significant part, as Anne and Jeffrey just elaborated for us, that occurs in a child's education occurs not in the classroom but in their home. The mother conveys to her children her fears and her hopes, her defeats and aspirations, and through the way that she handles life experiences. These hopes and values are what shape the outlook of her children and her grandchildren and really all the generations beyond and everyone who knew her, this incredible woman. And so this morning we celebrate Alice's life and all that she taught her children, her grandchildren, and each of us. And as we do, we recall that phrase from Yizkor, Imi Morati, my mother, my teacher. And we think about what we learn from this quiet yet powerfully inspiring woman. William Morris once said that the true secret of happiness lies in taking a genuine interest in all of the details of daily life. Paying attention to details made Alice happy, because through the little things she could make others happy in grand ways. And that for Alice was the most important detail of all, caring for those she loved. Somehow, with all that she did in her day-to-day life and managing the home, she found time for little moments and little details that many of us would probably miss, like warming the plates for her dinner guests before the meal, beautifully arranged flowers around her house and on the table, the perfect cup of tea, homemade challah every week for Shabbat, going on drives with Anne to see the leaves change or the trees in bloom, writing that perfect and timely thank you note, planning for days and days in advance every moment of those 90-minute Girl Guide meetings. Imi Morati, my mother, my teacher. Alice taught all of us that being thoughtful counts. She was so thoughtful that she would apologize for everything, every meal, every interaction. She didn't want to inconvenience anyone. That's how much she loved us. She devoted her life to other people. She was filled with kindness. She drew strength and purpose from sharing that kindness with others. And I'm sure that's why she chose a profession of nursing. She entered into nursing because she was a born caregiver. She made people feel better in just a few moments of interaction with her. And that was her incredible gift. As a nurse, Alice taught the hospital that she worked in and the larger medical community in Leeds a valuable lesson. Working in the children's ward after the war, it was the practice that parents only visited their sick children occasionally on a few weeks or within the course of a month. Alice knew intuitively that human connection, especially parents with children, was a source of great healing and strength. And so she changed that policy and allowed parents to stay with their children on the ward and to visit as often as either of them wanted or needed. Imagine a sick child laying in a hospital bed, alone and afraid, well before the days of cable television, internet, and video games. Alice brought that child comfort in the best possible way. She brought them their parents. That connection of parent to child was another thing that Alice taught through her love and lifelong dedication to Anne and to Jeffrey, to their spouses Eric and Lorraine, and to her grandchildren Daniel and Michal, Joshua, Jennifer, and Nathan. You were the greatest joy and the love of her life, along with her beloved husband of blessed memory, Stanley. I know from how you doted on her and cared for her that the feeling was reciprocated and exponentially greater for each of you toward her. Anne remembers how her mom was really fun. She would do anything for her children. She would feed them peanuts under the table as they pretended to play as monkeys. She'd put thick stockings on their feet so they could go skating along the linoleum floors. She played hours and hours of Chinese checkers, Scrabble, and puzzles, and would take extra care to find just the right book to read them at bedtime. Alice was adventurous. Diagnosed with a degenerative hearing loss, Alice was advised to avoid air travel as the pressure was not good for her hearing, the little hearing she had left. So when Eric and Anne moved to Vancouver, she had to get creative to see them and her grandchildren. 4 times, Alice crossed the ocean in cargo ships and freighter ships to come visit her family, including crossing through the Panama Canal. The picture in my mind is I'm still struggling to sort of imagine. This small, quiet, and lovely English mother traveling for up to a month on a cargo ship with rough and tumble merchant marines. Anne says that on one crossing it was a German freighter and that Alice ate brown bread and borscht for 4 weeks. But as we know, she would do anything for her family, anything to be with them. She taught us something there too, that there are no lengths that a mother will not go for her children, at least not this particular mother. And lastly, among the many things this Imi Morati taught us was through her deep commitment to Judaism and to the Jewish people. Alice converted after she was married, and we normally don't talk about the fact that somebody converted, but there is a lesson in this for us, and so I think we can mention it for merit. After she married Stanley, he came from an Orthodox home he had rejected that long before. He never asked or expected Alice to become Jewish, but it appears that she found in Judaism that the God was in the details. The emphasis on living a full life and living life fully, and the importance of family and the importance of education. Those were her values as much as they are the values of our tradition. Together with Stanley, they dedicated themselves to Sinai Synagogue, the Reformed congregation in Leeds. They both volunteered in the synagogue in many ways. Alice was a member of the Hever Kadisha. She sang in the choir. Not an easy feat for someone who couldn't hear herself sing. She baked cookies every week for the rabbi, babysat for his children, even walked his dogs. I got here just too late, Anne. Just too late. She was the go-to person in the community for people that were marginalized or needed a little extra Jewish mothering. Every community, every congregation needs a person like Alice, but far too few are blessed to have them. Both Sinai Congregation and Temple Sholom were blessed to have her. She and Stanley were drawn to the spiritual integrity of Reform Judaism, and they shared that with their children, who have followed in their footsteps. And you are one of the finest Jewish educators I have ever met or worked with. You credit your mom for your creativity, for your planning and attention to detail. And therefore, we all owe your mother a debt of gratitude, for she gave us you. Imanu Moratanu, our mother, our teacher. She was to everyone who knew her a mother and a teacher, not only to her children and grandchildren, but to all of us here. Everyone who, having heard her story and through that learned how she lived her life with such intention and purpose, dedication to others, we are reminded that we too can aspire to her example. We too can pay more attention to the little things, can find holiness in the details that show our love for others. We too, like Alice, can be fun and silly with our children and to go to even greater lengths to connect with them, even sailing for 30 days on a cargo ship with a bunch of German sailors halfway around the globe. And like Alice, we can find deeper meaning in our Judaism by honoring the imperative of chesed, of kindness, that was her creed and her code, to show kindness to others, to see in every person that reflection of the divine. May her memory be for a blessing. Amen. Friends, I'll ask you now to please rise as we chant the words of El Malei Rachamim, God who is full of compassion, as we escort Alice's soul to heaven.
El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamatzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Utehorim, Kezohar Harakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Rachel Bat Avraham Besara Shelcha Le'olama Baal Harachamim Yastireha Beseter Knafav Le'olamim Vaitzror bitzror hachayim et nishmata Adonai unachlata b'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava b'nomar Amen.
Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Alice, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence in the shadow of your wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. And we say together, Amen.
Amen.
At this time, I would like to invite the casket bearers to come forward and stand beside the casket, Jeffrey and Daniel and Eric, David Schwartz, Tobin Robbins, and Rabbi Bregman. Friends, we'll proceed directly from here to the Temple Sholom Cemetery. After the casket is placed in the coach, I ask you please to go directly to your cars and follow along in procession as best we can to the cemetery. There'll be Shiva tonight, Shiva Minyan tonight at 6 o'clock at Ann and Eric's home, and tomorrow night at 6 o'clock as well. The address is on your handout.